Ready to go, everybody? Sorry for the technical difficulties. Hello, guys. Try to make this as quick as possible, guys. Then we're the last one. It's been a long day. We are the Mounties. I'm Alex Gunn. Doug Williams. Ben here. Joe Biggin. And we are working on the Mountain Reddit project. To get you guys a bit of an idea about the domain, I'm going to show you a short little video. Break the monotony. This is what we call a yard sale if you're a skier.
Ow.
So this is a bit more of an extreme case, but it's not unheard of for what the ski patrollers have to deal with. And we have been tasked, our sponsor, the Hunt Hollow Ski Patrol. They are a member, they're a chapter of the National Ski Patrol Organization, and it's their job, they're a volunteer organization, to make sure that the skiers and snowboarders and winter sports enthusiasts stay safe while they enjoy their fun activities. So we are working on Mountain Medic, and the problem is that anytime a skier or snowboarder falls, has an incident, whatever it may be, they need to fill out an incident report, which is these forms right here. So we've actually got an example of these incident reports we're going to pass around. They're fairly lengthy. They're not fun to fill out, and what we are trying to do is make that job a little bit easier for the patrollers since they are volunteers. So by doing so, we are using an Android app that the last team made, since we are the legacy project right now, and that Android app will allow the user to fill in a series of checkboxes, text boxes, radio buttons, and whatnot to create the report on that form and then send it to a database. This will hopefully reduce any paperwork and keep down the bookkeeping nightmare that right now patrollers face. All right, so as we mentioned, there's a previous tablet application that we're working off of that the last team made. But the tablet features mainly is that it's just an easier way to input data. And instead of filling out a form or inputting it into a tablet application, they can carry out the tablet and they go out and deal with an incident. As it happens, they can bring the tablet to the incident site and fill out the data there instead of going back to the ski ledge from what was there or trying to write in the cell or something. So the main thing with the tablet, you input data, it syncs it to the server, and there's also user accounts and security levels so that a controller can create incidents that he created and you can't see other controllers' incidents that they created, since that's private information most of the time. So you've got a little bit of a demonstration of how it works for the previous team's application. So we just run it. All right, so we load up the previous application. Really pretty simple. You log in, you end up filling in a whole bunch of fields. You have to connect to the server first through settings, team port. Then you log in. When you sync actually for settings, it actually syncs and you actually pull in a whole bunch of information, user accounts and whatnot, so you can actually log in. And then you just got a whole bunch of fields here. For example, this is the demographics information, basically a whole lot of personal identification information, basically the date it happened, the name, all that. And then here we have basically just some other specific data. It's all of this data actually is representative of what's on the NSA form that's been being passed around. So this is actually your signature. You can save signatures in the application. And of course, this was all done last year. So basically, our job is taking everything here and getting it to work with our new server. So right here is actually one of the cooler features of the application. You can draw in basically injuries on a body instead of having to try to write it down and identify it that way. So it's pretty fun. We're taking all this information and basically getting it to work with our new server and then generating that NSA form that's being passed around. So as we mentioned, there's an Android application, and then there's the server application. We're using Microsoft Access to generate
the MSAA forms, and it was a MySQL database, and the previous team used Java. And what we're doing this year is we're just replacing the Java, and we're making a new C# and ASP.NET server, because the issue from last year was that when the sponsors came back to IT and wanted this project redone, basically they're having issues with the server, so they came to us, and our first goal was to troubleshoot what was wrong with the server. And after figuring that out, it was either do we resolve the issues with the server, or do we go forward and make a new server? Because a lot of the sponsors, they wanted to completely revamp the server. At that point, we realized, well, we probably just start from scratch, and it'll be a lot faster than trying to understand the old code and spend more time doing that. So we just wanted to immediately just go and make a new server. But still, of course, uses the Android application and still uses the access and the old database. And that's the whole sort of pipeline sequence there. So for the project history, as I mentioned, the previous team out cold. They made the Android application. Then their server, unfortunately, they didn't spend as much time working on, so it wasn't quite up to par where we were going to actually use it moving forward. So that's why we're revamping it and remaking the server. And the server data is available, and just previous projects, we just wanted to move forward with the
All right, so our process is going to be a little bit different than a lot of your processes in your projects because we broke it up into two different phases. Our initial phase was basically to go over all the artifacts and code from last year's project and try to reset up and troubleshoot any issues that we had with the old server. We were given a one-month time frame to do that, and we spent that time going over the code, working on the server, and reviewing all the old documentation and requirements and things like that. So once we were done with that, as we said before, we found that it was more feasible to just rewrite the server from scratch, and that's where our second phase comes in. This task is a little more traditional because we're starting to get into development, so we could pick a more formal process. However, since we had already put a good amount of time for the semester into the first phase, we decided to go with the rapid application development family for methodologies, and we chose evolutionary prototyping. By doing this, it allows us to interweave design and planning with development. So while there isn't quite as much planning and forethought whenever it comes to estimates and tasks like that, we are able to get prototypes out faster and get feedback from the sponsors faster so that we can continue to improve it. In order to make this work, we made it our goal to, at any time, have at least 2 weeks advanced planning for tasks, and that includes estimates and just an overall schedule. And at this point, we pretty much stuck pretty well to that. Occasionally, it will go up to 3 weeks, but there is flexibility. Also, we use the requirements from last year's artifacts. We corresponded with the sponsors and basically got any updates or clarifications on them. Taking those requirements and use cases, everything all together, we broke them down into separate tasks, which we then tracked in Redmine. Redmine allowed us to input a lot of our estimates and get some more metrics out, such as time spent and tasks completed over time as well. And yeah. So with those tasks, we were able to split up into releases. We aim for a release every 2 weeks. We have so far completed 2 releases, and we are working towards our third. Our initial release was focusing on a server proof of concept, and we wanted to get the data flow functional through our new technologies and just show that our ideas were valid and that we could go forward with this project with confidence. With our next release, we established an interface so that we could get feedback from the sponsors on how to improve that and how to expand on it. And then we also worked on the server backend to make it more robust and more expandable down the road. Now with our release 2, we plan on implementing the rest of the highest priority features that we've detailed, And once we get that in, we can use this release to hand to the sponsors, and they can start doing some usability testing over intersection, perhaps out in the field or in their own training environments. Hopefully we can get some good feedback from them over intersection, and we can start coming up with additional tasks and ideas for what to improve on once we get back for the next semester.
Okay, so as part of the server interface that I was chiefly in charge of, this is a view into our login screen. So it's just you enter a username of sorts and a password associated with it, and of course, as demonstrated there, it lets you know, oh, you did it wrong, your login failed, and so you can adjust that. So eventually, once you do enter correct information, you'll see this is actually okay. This isn't how it's going to look. This is, I guess, like if it was a rough draft, the first draft of it, and we've been in discussions more, and it will be changed further. But the general idea here was that each tab up at the top would represent some level of privilege that a particular employee could have, and then within that level of privilege, you would have these tabs here at the bottom, which would correspond to various responsibilities. And so by doing it this way, it was in effect a progressive disclosure kind of thing with the UI, and we felt that that was a clean way to do it. So basically, right here, we're just looking at a means of viewing users currently in the system, adding them, and then saving changes. But
for our back-end design, it's currently a little bit basic because we are rerunning it from scratch, and we are focusing on the core functionality, which is just taking the information from the client application, syncing it with the server, and then putting it into the database so that we can work with it from there. This is just a quick sequence diagram demonstrating that process where we take the information from the client, parse it using various connections and data handlers, and send it to the database using our framework.
As far as our measurements and our metrics went, sort of really the goal behind why and what we collected for our measurements and stuff and such was so that within each 2-week, I guess, iteration that we were doing, sprint, so to speak, we would look back at the past weeks and compare those numbers and say, okay, how much time were we spending in meetings, for example? How many times did we find ourselves off track? How many meetings total were we having? And so on. There are many more, but this is just a small snippet to give you an idea. But then from those initial measurements that we had collected, say, on a given set of 2 weeks, we would then look at more of the metrics that are just kind of elaborations from those initial measurements. And using that then, when we would look forward into planning for the next couple of weeks, we could then say, you know what, we have found ourselves coming short on the amount of time that we have actually worked versus the amount of time that we've estimated we'd be able to work. We need to make a decision here. Can we commit more time, or do we need to cut back a little bit? And so decisions like that can be made with a reasonable amount of, I guess, accuracy or confidence, I think was the word I was looking for.
So in the same way that we're trying to be active with our metrics, we're trying to be proactive with our risks. We make a note of every week to review our high priority risks and make sure that they will not happen, and potentially adjust ones that might be medium. Maybe something's become more relevant as we moved on in the days, or a risk that we thought was a low priority has actually jumped up and is now a high priority. We want to make sure that none of those actually happen, and a few of them have, but such as the crux of having a project. So this is a sample one right here. We keep a mitigation strategy, of course, chance of happening, impact, has it happened, how we solve it. Did we actually use a mitigation strategy, or we find that with a quick fix, something else ended up being more useful at the time? We really try to make sure that these do not actually set us back at all.
All right, so looking forward into intersection and the second semester, as Jeff mentioned, for intersection, at the end of our release, at the end of the semester, we're going to be giving this, what we've got so far, to the sponsors so that we can work with it, see where it's at where it is currently. And we're going to get a lot of sort of testing back from them, more usability testing. If they like what we've done with it, do they want anything changed, or get things if they find bugs in it. And we're going to be getting feedback from them over the course of the intersection, and we're keeping track of anything that they have issues with in our red line, so that when we come back, we can really start working on those. And we've also got the rest of the features that have been prioritized for the server that we're also going to be finishing up that aren't immediately necessary to have the server up and working for the system, but are definitely what the sponsor's looking to have completed by the end of the second semester. So that's also what we're going to be focusing on there. And because they'll actually be working with it while at the same time we're developing it, we're going to also be doing sort of support-oriented, so that we can sort of have it split both ways. We can do development, and we can have these sort of bug fixes or sort of feature changes with the sponsors as they're using the system. So we can do both in tandem. Questions?
So you mentioned usability testing. What other strategies or thoughts have you put into actual verification? What would be the process for ensure that the products?
Right. So for most of the features, before we start working on them, we always make sure to notify the sponsor then that we're approaching it the right way, especially for the interfaces. When we first designed those, we came up with mock-ups. We showcased those to the sponsors, make sure those were good. And then at the end of every 2 weeks for the releases, we present what we've got to our sponsors. We go through, we do a demo for them, showcase what we've done, ensure that they're okay with the work so far, and that's what we've done to ensure the quality to verify, so that they can verify the work and that it meets what they were expecting.
As you guys have looked at the existing system and worked through your process, have you thought about any additions or, let's say, innovations that might be possible that you suggested to the sponsors? Yeah, just kind of replicating the existing system.
We do plan on focusing a little bit more on the client towards our second semester. We will be trying to redo some parts to improve the usability of the client itself on top of the server. So we will be shifting our focus to that, as well as overall just taking into account any suggestions for additional features or preferences that the sponsors give us for both sides of the system.
But as of right now, since we are still in the process of kind of replicating last year's, we haven't been focusing on it. But as we go through, yeah, we have been jotting down things in our red line and feel like this should possibly be changed later, and could do this better. So.
Have you guys faced any instances of scope creep, and if you have, what do you do? We've had discussions with the sponsor about how after, if we can get to it, after we sort of got the re-implementation of the server done and get the system back up and working, where we can go from there. But right now, nothing's been added explicitly that was outside of, nothing's been added that was inside of our, that was outside of the scope when we started. So it's still the same scope we've been working with throughout. Do you feel like you could tell that scope at this point?
Yes.
I think that's it for questions. So, thank you, guys.